November 18th, 1999 is a painful day in Texas A&M history. On this day 25 years ago, 12 students lost their lives during the collapse of the annual Bonfire. 27 others were injured. The Texas A&M football program was connected to the tragedy from the start. It was, after all, a long-time tradition symbolizing Aggie students and their burning desire to beat their rivals at the University of Texas on the gridiron each year. But in 1999, that connection was much, much deeper, and it started just hours after the collapse when Texas A&M football players collectively made their way to the Bonfire site to lend a helping hand. It continued 8 days later when the Aggies beat the arch-rival Longhorns 20-16 in come-from-behind fashion. Everyone in that record crowd of 86,128 at Kyle Field and those watching on TV understood what had just happened was much bigger than a game. It was a healing moment that quarterback Randy McCown told reporters after the game, quote, "We had 12 angels with us." In this sports flashback, I visit extensively with McCown and we talk about the entire timeline of events, including what led to the decision for the players to go work at the Bonfire site, what happened when they arrived, the emotions of the moment, and what happened in the 8 days that followed. And of course, we go into the details of the big game against Texas, including the unspoken pressure and the calmness that McCown and the Aggie players felt. In those final minutes, when the senior quarterback threw his final ever pass at Kyle Field, a touchdown-winning toss to his roommate, and a fairytale finish made for a Hollywood movie. Follow along as we go back in time and relive this incredible story of tragedy and triumph. And now I'd like to welcome to the channel Randy McCown. Hey, Randy, thanks for joining me today.
You bet, Kyle. Good to be here.
So before we actually talk about that tragic week in November, I kind of want to go back to the season, right? And so just looking at your season, you guys the year before in 98, you finished 11-3, you won the Big 12. So you come into 99, you're ranked, and then later in the season, you're 7-3, you're ranked 20th. When the Longhorns come to town, they're ranked 9-2 and they're 6th ranked. So what do you remember of that season, the 99 season, before we got to that weekend in November?
Man, so there were some pretty high expectations for A&M that year. We had just came off, like you said, the 98 season and had some success there. We graduated some pretty key individuals, but, we had some youth coming into the fold, and guys like me were a year older. And so, we had some senior leadership, and man, if memory serves correctly, I want to say we were, a top 5 team, preseason ranking going into that season. Right. Then we go out to Lubbock, and of course, I don't know how many Texas Tech fans are going to hear this, but I think even you guys will, Longhorns will admit, playing in Lubbock, sometimes you're playing against more than just a team, and that's all I'll say. But anyway, nonetheless, we took an L out there in Lubbock. They beat us, and then we went up to Nebraska and took an L there. And so anyway, it was kind of, we were still kind of in the mix, but it was, it wasn't quite going the way that we had hoped it would. Right. And then the week comes up with Texas, and of course, how that's always, when that game comes, it really doesn't matter what happens prior to. You're going to get everybody's best effort.
Right. So we get to that week, and then as the date shows behind me, November 18th, 1999. So kind of tell me where you were when you found out what all happened for you to learn about the Bonfire and the collapse.
Okay. Crazy thing that happened. So if you remember, and I don't know if they're still doing it now that this year, I haven't looked. Hopefully, the more they can do that's similar to how it used to be, I think the better it'll be for both teams. But we used to take the week off before we played Texas.
Right.
Always week. And so that week, I want to say, man, it might have been Wednesday night, and we're having some friends at the house, kind of a late night get together, as most college kids do. And man, the police show up, and they were saying, "Look, guys, had a few complaints from the neighbors, just tone it down a little bit. Nothing out of the ordinary for college life." But I can remember talking to, the police officer on the porch, and like mid conversation, they weren't uber upset. They were just, and it wasn't like we were just, raising hell. It was just, just normal stuff. He says, look, we're right in the middle of the conversation. He goes to his deal and he's like, hey, we got to go. Guys, please just turn it down. And they split really quick. Well, at the time, as a college student, you're like, dodged a bullet. Well, that next morning, they were responding to the bonfire when it collapsed. And so the next morning, get an early phone call from, I think all of my roommates got calls from our parents early back then. Of course, you got to remember in '99, man, cell phones were just coming out.
Right,
We're
right.
calls on landlines. We still got caller ID. You remember that little thing,
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So they call them like, "Hey, is everything okay?" And when your mom had everything okay, you're like, "Okay, what do you know that I don't know?"
Right.
'Cause, like, what do we do? Everything. And she's like, "Hey, the bonfire fell." Like, oh my god! And so then it was just kind of a day of gathering information and just kind of we it didn't happen until about, gosh, we were on our way to practice, and some of those seniors, me, Shane Leckler, Jason Webster, um, we hear kind of what's going on site, and so we decided to say, man, we need to go out there. And so it was kind of a culmination of players were kind of going in that direction. Coaches kind of saw what was going.
Right.
Coaches were going to. Next thing we know, practice gets canceled, and the whole team goes out there. And the reason why we were going out there is because we had heard that they're not using any equipment, and they're all removing it by hand.
Right.
And whether it was accurate thought or not, we felt like, well, look, if you're doing it by hand, we're the best. Maybe not the quarterbacks, but the guys in the trenches, they're the best ones for the job. I'm
Right.
just tagging along. But nonetheless, so we go out there, and it was almost as if, Kyle, like, we got out there and they're like, look, guys, you can't help me. Like, we kind of felt like, I mean, that whole thing is to represent the burning desire to beat Texas.
Right.
Well, we're in the middle of the story. We feel very connected and attached to that. And so we more or less just kind of say, well, all right, we're fixing to go help. And if you guys want to stop us, we'll find out if you can, you know?
Right.
And fortunately they said, okay, well, if you guys are hell bent on helping us, let us show you what to do. Also, my family, I'm a fourth generation in the sawmill and pallet business.
Okay.
So I know I've been around trees my whole life. And I will never forget this for the rest of my life. We were on a 40 or 50-foot log, and I've been around these kind of logs since I was little. I know how heavy they are. And we had these guys that were guiding us, and and I remember looking down that log, and I see Samisi Hamuli, who's a Tongan. I see Jason Glenn. I mean, you just see almost every ethnicity represented. And I'm thinking to myself, we're fixing to try to lift this log. I know how heavy these are. And this leader, he says, all right, what we're going to do is we're going to count it off like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And it was like 1, 2, put it to your hip, 3, 4, flip it up on your shoulder. And we did that, and we started moving logs. And I'm just like, wow, this is crazy. I never would have thought 20 or 30 guys could do this. And so then we just stayed there and helped them till they told us that was all we could do. And then we kind of took a step back and then just waited to see what else happened, and that was kind of, leading up to when it failed. And to that point, that was kind of the sequence of happened.
You've already set the scene for me, but kind of give me a feel of who was directing you guys. Was it your coaching staff listening to people who were on site, engineers? How was it all working? And kind of give me a sense of the emotion there, because I mean, clearly there's fatalities, and are you expecting you might see something that you don't want to see? I mean, kind of give me a sense of how you felt going in, and then once you got there and once they started putting you guys to work.
So, people start coming to the stadium, start coming to Kyle Field because we practiced at the stadium.
Right.
They started coming to the stadium 2:30, 3 o'clock. And usually quarterbacks got there first, and a few other people. And so when players started showing up, you just kind of started to hear kind of like, man, we need to go out there. We need to go out there,
Right.
And so, like I was saying, some of our seniors kind of got together, and we just kind of started to go that way. And then I think it was kind of a coordinated effort. I think the coaches, it was kind of coaches were thinking it, players were doing it, but everybody was kind of on the same page,
Right.
and next thing you know, like, we're loading up in the by the pickup, going to across campus to the bonfire side. Then when we got there, of course, you had your corps cadet leaders. Like I remember some guys had, the Army helmets on, they were doing that kind of stuff. And it was just extremely limited to access to it because there were still people in there. And so we weren't necessarily involved with the like getting up close and personal, but there was like a lot of stuff that needed to be cleared to get to an area where they could really start to dig into it. And so that's where we kind of felt like, okay, we can really be a service. And so that was kind of it. It was so we were under some guidance, and even coaches were out there. I mean, it seems like one night I couldn't sleep or something, and I was Googling it years ago, and there's actually some pictures, of when we were doing that, and you just got all kind of different races. Guys were dirt. I mean, you could just tell that it wasn't like a, hey, let's just show up and pretend like we're doing this for a photo op. It was like, we're here to help. We're gonna help. Somebody tell us what to do, and we'll be your best help. And that's what we did.
So you get there and you're doing the help. And how long did you ultimately stay and help that day?
Man, I would say a few hours. It seems like we left before it got dark, and I can remember practice. Started mid afternoon, so I'd say somewhere around 3 or 4 hours, something like that. We were just there, and like I said, we just kind of moved the stuff that was out on the outside, and they were just very, very particular about doing anything with any kind of machinery at the beginning because they just didn't know what kind of impact that it might have, chain reaction or whatever that you might see if they did something and could cause, just a very delicate scenario or situation when they first got there.
Right. So when you left the scene, how are you feeling?
Man, it was wild because, and of course, how I felt then and how I would feel now if that was one of my kids. That's really wild
Right.
because at the time, there's a little bit of part of that burning desire. I mean, and Kyle, I mean, I kind of got to back up and tell you this. Like, you remember a guy who's, I think your age, Corey Pullig,
Of course.
like, of course, when I got to A&M, man, my mindset was, I was like, Corey, why do we have such this rivalry? I don't want to say hate, but why are we so this way against those guys? And his exact words, Kyle, were, just wait, you'll get it. And I mean, like, I don't know what else about my family, but me and my brothers,
Right.
we've got this whole football thing, and I was being the first. It was never like, all right, this is what we're going to try to do. It was like, hey, look. So anyway, I
Right.
say all that to say there was a tremendous amount of like pride and that burning desire thing, and so it was kind of like a, man, these guys were supporting us, and man, we want to beat Texas, and heck yeah, man, we need to give back, and it was like that. But I don't know how many 21 or 22-year-olds really have a true grasp of just life in itself,
Right.
and at the time, it wasn't confirmed what we had lost. So it was just kind of like, man, we want to help because these guys are supporting us. We want to help them, that kind of thing. But nothing had been confirmed. But then fast forward now to where I've got 4 kids and got kids in college, and you go, wow, but I mean, like I said, the things I'll never forget was, how not only did, like, I see guys of different backgrounds coming together to help move that wood, but, and I'm sure we'll talk about it later, but even how it made Texas and A&M kind of come together,
Right.
and so it just goes to show you, and it's really sad if you think about it because you hate to see. It's tragedy is when we as people kind of we put down all the differences, and that's when we come together. You're like, why can't we do that without the tragedy?
Right.
So, not to get too big picture on you, but
No, that makes complete sense. So did you ever go back and help, or was it just that one time where they actually called you guys to help, or kind of how did that work?
man, we didn't go back. It was kind of one of those things because I think there was stuff um that we were kind of able to get involved in on our own. And
Right.
like I said, when we first got there, they were like, no, man, you guys need to stay back. And of course, you know, being the quarterback and being a senior, I was probably up at the front, and then there's the linemen tend to be a little bit less diplomatic, and of course, they were probably like, heck yeah, man, we're going to stop you, quarterback. You're not going in. But then when they saw the other guys that were coming in, they were like, uh-oh. And so we more or less just kind of said, look, we're here to help and we're going to help. And so that's what we did. And, but then once we got that done, I think all the stuff that we were actually qualified or was feasible for us to lend a hand with, that was kind of over. And then it was like, okay, now it's getting a little bit more delicate, and we're starting to uncover more. And they were like, look, guys, now y'all really just need to thank you, and now just kind of stand aside.
So you mentioned it, Randy, a second ago about you only learned later about fatalities. So once you started realizing the magnitude of what had happened, I mean, of course you knew something bad had happened, and I'm sure there were rumblings going on, but once it was confirmed that 12 kids had died, I mean, how do you process that? You're the same age as those guys. I know you're talking about it now, reflecting back on it as a father, and I can completely understand that, having kids of my own. But when you're in that situation and you're the age of those fallen students, how did it impact you?
Man, you begin to, they were doing that to represent, A&M,
Right.
but I mean, ultimately they're supporting us. I mean, we're not, we're building a bonfire, but man, we didn't do that when right before we played you guys in baseball or
Right.
basketball. I mean, that was the biggest. I mean, some would say, that was one of the biggest things, if not the biggest thing in the state of Texas in football. And so when you look at something like that, man, this is what these guys are doing, and then when you start to learn about what all goes into it, man, it's just humbling, because you're like, man, these guys are doing this to show support for us.
Right.
Which once you begin to process that whole thought, then a whole nother wave of thoughts and emotions come with it as you approach game time. Because nobody said it, but the last thing you wanted to do was go out and lose. And it was one of those things that nobody wanted to put. What's the word? Nobody wanted to put that level of significance on a game. But in terms of when you're saying, okay, man, what is the best thing that this university needs, and what better way to pay tribute than is to, like, and it's almost even hard to say, because you're trying to say a win does this when there's nothing that can replace
Right.
or even compare to what those people sacrificed. But it was just very humbling, because I mean, they weren't doing that to get their name in the paper. That Not that I know of. They weren't doing that to any kind of sell. It was just, we want to serve the university and support these guys. And so, man, it was really humbling.
Right. So we go forward. Let's go through that 8 days. After that happens, kind of walk me through just the prep. I know you mentioned a second ago about kind of the unity between the University of Texas and Texas A&M during that week. Kind of talk to me about what that week, that 8 day period looked like for you and your team.
There was a DVD that A&M put out a few years ago called Burning Desire, and there were some interviews with Coach Brown. Like the stuff that the halftime display, we never knew about that until after the fact. Which I'm in terms of just athletic competition and whatnot. Maybe it was good that we did know about it, because I mean, we wanted to have that burning desire to beat you, but that'd be kind of like, that's one of those things. Man, that's pretty cool. They did that. Same thing. Like on that Burning Desire DVD, Coach Brown, talks about how it impacted him, and it's kind of weird, because like I was telling you earlier, and that's why I shared that with you about Corey Pullick saying, "Man, you'll get it. It's you'll understand soon enough." So
Right.
there is that burning desire of competition that we have between each other as rivalries, but yet it was encouraging, heartwarming, just to know that man, when it's time to take care of one another as people, that's what matters.
Right.
And as I've just learned more about Coach Brown, and just through the years I've seen him, that I'm not surprised. I mean, him, like I said, him and Coach Slocum are, a lot alike. And I think there's a lot of just old school wisdom, just good human beings that the world can't have enough of people like that. And so But I didn't know all that at the time that all this was happening. This was all stuff that was just kind of that you learn about, as I'm sure some people listen to your thing and go like, wow, I didn't know that about, you know, the Aggies and McCown and that kind of thing. So it's cool to hear these stories as they come out. For me, that was the last time I was going to get to play in Kyle Field. That was the last time we are going to play Texas. Being a senior, I didn't play professionally, so you're feeling these emotions of like, man, it's winding down, at that time I knew like maybe I get a chance, maybe but there was probably a bigger chance I wasn't going to continue playing than there was that somebody give me a chance. So you have all that going on. Then you bring in this other stuff where you're like, it just changes everything. And but I can remember that week, there was a level of pressure, but nobody was talking about it. Nobody was. It was just like, man, we're going to work, but everybody, it was kind of like in the back of everybody's mind. We're like, I mean, we need to bring this at home, and so it was all those emotions, you're like going through like, man, this is because after that we weren't going to play in the Big 12 championship that year, and then so then after that you're like, man, even if we would have, we're practicing in a neutral site, for a bowl game and whatnot. So I mean, the whole thing's coming to an end. Plus that it was just a lot of pressure, but I can't really recall in terms. I remember Coach Slocum kind of addressing the elephant in the room, but he tried to make it as much of a normal week as possible. Because I think everybody knew to themselves what we all felt like we needed to do, and nobody ever came out and said, let's win one for those guys. But everybody just knew, like, we don't know if this is what is going to be the cure all, but we know this will help. So what we need to try to do our best.
All right. So then we go to that 8 days later. Kyle Field, 9-2 Texas, 6th ranked comes in. You guys are 20th ranked and 7-3, 86,128, which at the time was the single largest football game in Texas history, not just Texas A&M, the state of Texas.
Yes.
So talk to me about that crowd and that environment when you walked in to Kyle Field and saw all those people.
Well, let's see. You have pretty good weather today where you were?
Yes.
Yeah. It's a beautiful day up here in East Texas. And now that we're talking about it, I can remember that back then because I was like, man, it was just a beautiful autumn day, and that was when I think that was an 11 o'clock game that day or 10, whatever, it was something like that. So perfect time of the day, perfect weather. I think there had been some mention that, if everybody, which it's kind of like if everybody shows up, well, hell yeah, they're going to pack it for Texas and A&M. So, so everybody knew we were probably going to set the state, an all-time record there. Like you said, you guys are 6, we were 20. Like we talked about earlier, throw all the records out, but it was an opportunity for us. And so again, just kind of going through the whole normal thing, trying to make it as normal as possible, but knowing in the back of our minds that it wasn't. And the things I remember about that, Kyle, was that during the game, I remember it wasn't. Well, I'll tell you what. I've got it. Actually, I've got it in my mom and dad's house. I hadn't had the nerve to, or not the haven't had the heart to ask my mom for it. But I don't know if it's in the Dallas Morning News, but it was my favorite picture of all time. And there was a moment of silence right before it, and I don't know how it worked out, but it wound up. The guy took the picture with. I was standing there on the field, and you have the A&M home side or student section in the background. And I've got my head bowed, just standing there. It's a beautiful day, and it was that moment of silence. And so I can remember that, and was so thankful for that picture and all that. But then we go into the game, and man, we didn't play that good. We're just kind of struggling. And typically, when you go through those games, you go in at halftime, and especially a game of that magnitude, man, you feel this sense of urgency. Like, man, we just got another half. We got to get it together because we're going. We got the second half, and that's it. And I can remember it was the calmest I've ever been, in a sense, and even talking to some of the other guys, it was just like, man, yeah, we were worried. No, man, I just felt like we were always going to win it. Whatever that was, whatever I don't know what it was. I just know the feeling that I had was like it was just like, hey, it's gonna be all right. This is what we need to do. We're gonna do it better. We got the second half. We're in previous games. There was always like, hey man, we better get it together, But there was that sense of calmness, and then of course the second half, we go into the game and did that, and I don't know how much you know about how it ended, but my last pass in Kyle Field was to my roommate to be the go ahead touchdown against Texas.
Right.
So for me personally, and of course I've got two brothers. One played in the NFL for 18 years, one for 13 years. I, I don't know if they'd trade all that for a moment like that, but they'd trade some of it.
Right.
And what better way to end a career and then even that game, how that ended,
Right. So I want to get to that because I just find that fascinating. It's like a complete fairy tale story at the very end. So I want to get to that. But before
Okay.
we get to that, I want to kind of go back to that first half. And you talked about it. Y'all trailed 16-6 going into
Yep.
the halftime, going into the locker room. Kind of give me a sense. I know you said that you guys felt a calm, like a calming presence there. But did
Yes.
RC say anything that stuck out in particular to you guys? Or was it just kind of give me a sense of what he said, if anything special during that halftime?
Man, I can't recall anything in general, Kyle. The thing that was so great about Coach Slocum was that, man, he was just, what's the best way to put it, man? He always had a bunch of wisdom, I guess you'd say, you know,
Right.
and I by having that in situations like this, and I found this out later about Coach Brown, a lot of the same, just they're they weren't necessarily like how you got, especially nowadays, you got some coaches that it's all about them.
Right.
They're very animated, and don't get me wrong, Coach Slocum could get upset for a call not going the right way
Sure.
with, but I just think in his wisdom about how he handled that whole week, he had the perfect balance of we're going to play this game to the best of our ability and hope that we can honor those ones that had lost their lives, but making it too big of a deal to the point that it adds undue pressure or makes us play tighter, that would not be good. And so he just maintained that balance because, like I said, there was just a, for me personally, especially, there was just a eerie, like, just calmness about this whole thing that even I mean, I think my might have had a couple turnovers in that game and just never going like, oh man, I got to try harder. We got to press. It was like, hey, it's gonna be all right. Next play, do what we're supposed to do. And I think that was probably the biggest thing that I can recall about Coach Slocum was just how he handled that whole week with just the right amount of we know what we're doing and we know what's going on, but we're not gonna get too much too tense about it.
Okay, so then you come out of the second half, and clearly, you can tell that you have the calm about you. You guys go down, you score. Into third quarter, it's 16-13, and then in that fourth quarter, I watched the whole game last night, painfully so,
Really,
I must say. But I watched the entire game, and then at the very end, so we're like 6 minutes remaining into the game, and you make a big pass to Chris Cole down the right sidelines
yep.
to the 13. So kind of give me a sense in that fourth quarter, like you've already said, the calming, you go down, you score, you're within 3 in the third quarter. In the fourth quarter, you make that pass to Chris Cole. You have to feel like this is our chance. We got to close the deal here.
Yeah, you hit that pass, and then this is going to sound like I made this up, but with God as my witness, I'm going to tell you the God honest truth on how this thing went down.
Right.
So we go up there, and I guess it's on the 13. I thought it might have been a little bit closer, but I guess it was on the 13 from when we threw that pass, and we're actually on the right hash. And so we've got two basically just fade routes, and we've got Chris Taylor on the left, and he I think was a 6th-round pick for the Steelers, his receiver if memory serves, and so he's a good player. And then you got Bumgardner on the right into the short side of the field. And so as you're tall as a quarterback, it's not rocket science, but you got more field to work with if you go to Chris Taylor
Right.
because there's more room for error. And so, Kyle, I go up there and get ready to take the snap. And I look to my right, and there's Bum. And I look to my left, and there's Chris. And see, Bum and I were roommates. And so, Bum and I, we roomed together as true freshmen. Then I lived with some other guys for 1 year, my sophomore year, and then I moved back in with Bum and 2 other guys and the way the house was configured, everybody got their own room except for me and Bum. We're like, well, look, man, we can make it work. You know, we didn't kill each other our freshman year. We can handle it. It's a big room too, by the way. So I didn't want to make sure I, clear. We weren't like sharing the same big room. So anyway, in that big room, you can imagine there's a lot of times when, as you're winding it down, the conversation goes like this: "Hey, man, you awake? Yeah, man, you awake? Yeah." And so you just start talking about, well, you can imagine when the quarterback and the receiver, when the receiver's got the ear of the quarterback, he's selling himself. Hey, man, I'm telling you, Mac. He's like, if you ever get in a bind, just throw it up. Just throw it up. Okay, all right, and maybe he beat it into my head. I don't know. But Kyle, with as sure as I'm sitting here, look to the right, look to the left, don't look back to the right, and it's like I hear Bum say, "Man, just throw it up, I'll get it." Okay, and so we snapped the ball, and you said you watched it. So if you look at that throw, today I don't know how much you're familiar with. There's like a back shoulder throw,
Of course,
and
yeah.
that throw like it's kind of a little bit more of a. It's not a line drive, but it's not a lob either.
Oh, I
And
noticed you.
so,
I noticed you definitely threw it before he even came close to turning around.
hey, and it was not the reason why I kind of went into that little description of a back shoulder throw, because
Right.
if you just look at it, you go like, oh, that's a great back shoulder throw.
Right.
No, I wasn't throwing a back shoulder throw. I was just throwing it up. And if you were to talk to Bum, if you watch how he caught it, if you look at it as a receiver, he didn't catch it how they're taught.
Right.
He didn't high point it.
Right.
He basket caught that thing. And Bum will tell you, he said, "Man, I lost in the sun." And so you have all these things, which I mean, you can kind of imagine if you were making this Hollywood movie, the ball goes into the sun and it's the sunlight and the receiver, and then it just comes out of the sun, out of the heavens, so to speak, and here he catches the ball. And so it was just crazy how that went down, because I mean, I'm telling you, I know it sounds like it's, oh, come on, Mac, you're making it up, but I'm dead serious. That's exactly how it went. And then I just threw it up, and he caught it. And so then that happens, and then like I said, kind of tying it back into the '98 deal. I think if '98 doesn't happen, we don't win in '99, because we approached. It was kind of similar. It wasn't the exact time frame, but we go up with 2 or 3 minutes to go in '98, kind of like we go up in '99 with about the same amount of time. '98 we play prevent, and Applewhite nickels and dimes us all the way down the field to get into field goal range, kick the field goal, into the game. In '99, we pin our ears back and play aggressive rather than conservative, and get a turnover, and the rest is history. So,
Yeah. And so you guys get the ball, you do the victory formation. Then I see you hold the ball up and hold both arms above your head triumphantly. So what's going through your mind then? Because a short time later, they show you crying. I mean, visibly crying. So kind of walk me through those, those 5 minutes after the game, the relief, the sadness, what's going through your mind at that point? Cause you've just done something that you said, you felt calm, that you felt like it was going to happen. You talked about the pressure of needing to do this. This was a healing moment for the university. So talk to me about what you're feeling once the final seconds tick off the clock.
oh man, everything. Everything. You're just looking at it and going, we just beat the rival. We just, I mean, I should have thought about this. I've actually still got the ball at my mom. My mom and dad, they've got like this one room that's got all the stuff in it. I just hadn't had the heart to say, hey, I'd like to put that in my room, but I've actually still got that ball from that game.
Okay.
And man, we did it. I mean, it was, you're sitting there. I mean, even as you were sitting there explaining it, man, I'm getting, a little bit emotional just thinking about it, because I'm like, man, that was pretty wild, but just, you know, you won. You nobody talked about it all week, but everybody damn sure knew that's what we needed to do, and you did it.
Right.
It was your last game. This is the last time that you're ever going to be on Kyle Field, and it was to beat the Longhorns under this magnitude of pressure. Just my parents were there. It was just a culmination of, and I'm going to tell you. So you remember back then, we would play, and you'd have TCU and SMU play, and another thing that I kind of remember about that particular day. So there was all that emotion, but just not knowing the physical toll, emotional, mental, all the toll that it took on you. So my brother Josh was starting for SMU, and that was a big game for them. That was their Texas game for SMU,
Right.
and I never missed one of his games. And Kyle, we finally got done with all the media and all that stuff and got back to the house. And I'm watching that game. And literally, I mean, I guess pass out's probably a little bit strong, but just fall asleep, pass out in the middle of his game, which I've never done because it was just like, it was just so heavy.
Right.
And so, yeah, man, it was just that was crazy because I mean, you had all the just about every emotion times 100 is what you were dealing with.
So do you remember after the game what you said? Because I have a particular quote here, but I'm curious if you kind of remember, because I know you talked to multiple media members, but there was one particular quote that I was curious if anything that you said stuck out, if you remembered.
Man, probably the thing I can remember the most would probably just be, um, and I don't know if this is appropriate or not, but at the time I told myself, man, it was kind of like we were playing, with some extra help from above or something along those lines, and so that was uh, I don't know. Was that's about I can remember something like that. I can't remember the verbatim or exact quote that I said, but that's I don't know. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, you said we had 12 angels with us. They weren't going to let us give up.
Yeah, yeah. It was. I kind of figured that was what it was. To be honest with you, I didn't want to mess up and say something wrong and then say it. But yeah, that goes back to that calm feeling, man. I'm telling you, dude. Um, that was the weirdest thing. And then even like I said, and you could call Bumgarner today and he'd say, yeah, man, I lost it in the sun. And so I can just envision kind of being, in his viewpoint of that ball, he sees it, then loses it in the sun, then it just kind of comes out of the sun and here's this ball coming. And that'd be a pretty cool movie if you ask me,
Yeah, yeah.
And
Well,
so,
and the fact you add in that it was your last ever pass at Kyle Field. I mean,
yeah.
you can't make a better ending, right?
Oh man, that's what I mean. I mean, that wasn't like, I mean, that was the last pass ever for me to throw there. And so, I mean, that's just about it. Like I said, I don't think Josh and Luke would trade their NFL careers for it, but they might give up 5 or 6 years for it because that's not just, I mean, you know, they're banking, they're going to get to retire a little bit earlier than I am, but they're not having conversations like you and I are having.
Of course. So you've talked about what Mac Brown did and these things that you've learned about the bonfire and that 25 years ago, and what happened in that week, because you were so caught up in being an athlete and preparing for your game. So you've learned things about what happened. So anything else that you've talked to people through the years? I'm guessing when people talk to you, they obviously they're Aggie fans. They're going to talk to you about the game and what you did and y'all won. But that game specifically is going to be special. And I can only imagine that you get people who come up to you and talk to you about that specific game.
Yeah, without a doubt. Um, the thing, I guess I'm just kind of thinking about, encounters that I may have with people, and it's kind of mixed. There's people that would like to see Bonfire come back. There's people that, that I don't think they necessarily don't want it to, but they just go like, man, I just can't get a comfortable feeling about what that looks like.
Right.
And I respect that and get it. So there's that part of it. There's there's the other thing they say is, man, can you believe that was 25 years ago? I'm like, yeah, thanks for the reminder.
Yeah.
You know, but man, for the most part, people want to, it's kind of like any other significant event in life. You remember where you were at 9/11. You remember where you were when you heard about the bonfire falling, and of course, two totally different scenarios. But the point is that significant events, you remember those things, and so people will just talk about, man, I can't believe that happened, and this and you never hear anybody say like, but I'm sure glad y'all won, but man, they'll say, man, that sure helped kind of get things back. Not normal, not nowhere at all, but there's got to be a beginning step towards life getting back on. Just you got to get back to doing life. And that was the perfect first step on that journey. And for some people, it was a long journey, and people may still be on it, and for others, it may have been shorter. But that sure was a good first step.
Right. So now, Randy, that was 25 years ago, as we just talked about. In the 25 years, as I mentioned, you've talked about, you've got a family. So kind of catch up Aggie fans with what you've been doing since you left the Aggie campus.
Yeah, well, I've married my high school sweetheart. She's class of '01, so we've got, fortunately we didn't have to worry about a house divided or anything like that. So that's good. Um, been in the pallet industry. So we're make lumber, make pallets, and been doing that. And fourth generation at doing that. Got four healthy, amazing kids that are scattered about. None of them yet have graced Aggie land. Got one that decided they wanted to be. She actually cheered at Baylor for 2 years, and then got a couple of sons that are in the process of, or either playing quarterback at the collegiate level at a small school in East Texas, and then another one that wants to be there playing at the next level. Don't know where they got that from, and and then have a daughter that's she's a junior in high school, and she's all into dance and playing volleyball, and it's great. And of course, the running joke that they always, especially my sons, because they always wanted to get a college scholarship, and like I said, one of them did, and the other one's trying to get one. They always said, "Well, what if Texas offers me a scholarship?" And I said, "Well, somebody else will too." you know, so I understood that. Of course, like I said, in the aftermath of all the bonfire stuff, it's been a little bit harder, because I mean, you got to recognize the love and respect that we compete as adversaries, whether it's Aggies and Longhorns, and we compete. But then when it comes down when there's times that we need to be just good people and take care of people, it was extremely encouraging and heartwarming to see that show. And it's like that old saying, you really find out who you are in the tough times, and you really find out who really cares about you in the tough times. I had an old coach told me one time, he said, "Man, everybody calls you when you win." He said, "You find out who your real friends are when you lose." And so it was pretty cool to see how Texas responded in that fashion.
All right. So last question. I got to ask. The rivalry is being renewed this year.
Yep.
Thoughts on this finally, after all these years of not playing each other, the two have been brought back together in the Southeastern Conference. Give me I have to think that you're a fan of it.
Oh, without a doubt. It's just been interesting. Um, the I don't know how things kind of run in a cycle. Um, through the last 25 years, I can remember when you guys came out with the Longhorn Network. I thought, shoot, it's like they got ahead of us, And then when we got into the SEC, I didn't think it was going to translate like it did with Manziel and the success that we had there. But then I thought, heck yeah, we're in the driver's seat, So it's funny how the ebbs and flows come of it. And I'll be honest, at the when they announced that it was coming back, I thought, shoot, man, I would, why couldn't they have done this? Those Manziel years, we had him and that, and Vaughn, and so because you guys were kind of low and we were kind of high, and of course I'm glad that y'all didn't play us when y'all had Vince and Colt, because y'all were high and we were low. So but so it's been moments when I'm sure you guys would have wanted it to be renewed, and there was likewise with us. Right. And so when it first came out, I thought, shoot. But I got to tell you, how Coach Elko's done, and the way the team's playing, man, I got to tell you, at the beginning of the year, I wouldn't think that it would be coming together as it's coming together, because, I mean, I think you guys are going to be ranked higher than us, but I think it's kind of like it was in '99. It's one thing to say, well, you throw the records out, and you do to a certain extent, but when you've got somebody that's scratching and clawing to be 500 and another person that's in the top 10, that record thing, it's like, hey man, one team's better than the other.
Right.
But it's close enough that, and then playing at Kyle Field, I think it's going to be a hell of a game. I think either team, if they went into it thinking they've got the upper hand, I think they're foolish. I think everybody ought to pay their back and go and play, because I think it's going to be, it's just a great way to bring the rivalry back. Because I mean, if we would have been ranked 5 and you guys would have been bad, or vice versa, then it would still have the luster, but not quite the way it is. I think it's really setting up to be a heck of a game, heck of an environment.
I'm excited for it. It should have never gone away, but it did. And I'm glad that it's renewed, because we should play each other. That's the way it was always done. It's always been that way. So I'm glad that it's back. And again, Randy, I really appreciate you taking the time to kind of go back in history and revisit that tragedy of 1999, but how you guys were involved in it as a team. And then the game, as painful as it was for me, I take solace in the fact that it was, and watching the broadcast, because I didn't go to the game, but I remember them talking about how it was kind of a healing moment, and hearing you kind of go behind the scenes and saying how it was, y'all had this pressure that you didn't want to talk about. You felt this calmness about you, and then you went out and won. And so, congratulations on the win, but it was much bigger than football. And I feel like, looking back on it and just talking to you, it was such a special moment in history. And I'm glad that you took the time to revisit with me and just talk about it, because I think it's a moment, as we discussed in the very beginning, fans can connect to that moment, the tragedy, but then what happened afterward and the healing. So thank you again, Randy. I really appreciate you joining me on Sports Flashback, and wish you best of luck with your business. And maybe we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I appreciate everything.